Now, Dr. Cal Halvorsen is an assistant professor at the Boston College School of Social Work. His research interests include the antecedents, experiences, and outcomes of longer working lives, with emphasis on later life self-employment and entrepreneurship, encore careers, and older adults as social innovators. Cal was selected as an inaugural member of the 2018 to 2019 Encore Public Voices Fellowship and has taught courses related to aging societies, social work practice, and research methods at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. Welcome, Cal.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tina. So I study issues of work, both paid and unpaid, past midlife, and well into the traditional retirement years. And meaning and purpose certainly has a lot to do with this. So before joining academia, as Tina said, I was the director of research at encore.org. In my time there, and before even as an MSW student, I worked on issues related to how to increase the socio-demographic diversity of older volunteers, as well as research and programs related to encore careers, older adults as social innovators, and helping community colleges and universities to become more welcoming and supportive of older students seeking to change careers. So while there, I also started to think a lot about older adults as entrepreneurs. And so after deciding to leave this dynamic organization to pursue my dream of a PhD, I continued down this path. I've still focused some of my efforts on institutions of higher education, and particularly social work programs, as I'm a proud social worker within the School of Social Work, can be more welcoming to students at or past midlife. I also focus some of my research on the Senior Community Service Employment Program, working with the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs to identify ways to strengthen the sole federal workforce program for low-income older workers. And a lot of my time is devoted to getting a better understanding of self-employment and entrepreneurship in later life. And to be clear, these terms, self-employment and entrepreneurship, are often used interchangeably in research and the media, even though they can sometimes mean different things. So today, I will focus on this last topic, self-employment and entrepreneurship. And in the first part of my talk, I'll provide some statistics derived from the Health and Retirement Study, a nationally representative study of approximately 20,000 Americans over the age of 50 that is funded by the National Institute on Aging and the US Social Security Administration. So for at least the past dozen years, and considering only those who are in the labor force, we've had a consistent rate of about 1 in 5 workers over the age of 50 being self-employed. In other words, a little more than 20% of all workers past the age of 50 work for themselves. Yet using a life course framework, we know that these rates might differ by age among the older workers themselves. And this is indeed true with to use a pretty unscientific word, a giant difference by age groups. While only about 1 in 6 people in their early 50s are self-employed, about 1 in 3 are self-employed by their late 60s, and about 1 in 2, or half of workers, are self-employed by the time they pass the age of 80. Now that is a big difference with age. Reasons include an increasing desire for flexible work, for meaning and purpose with age, as well as with the desire to be one's own boss. Yet it also includes the fact that age discrimination is real, and it becomes increasingly difficult to find work the older you are. So the answer for many is to work for themselves. So as we start to think about intersectionality, I'm actually in the process of developing a series of research briefs through the Center on Aging and Work at Boston College that break down the statistics I just provided by key sociodemographic factors. So I'll give you just 2 examples here, gender and race. So looking again at the past dozen or so years and considering only people 50 and older and only people within the labor force, the share of older male workers who are self-employed has been about 10% higher than the share of older female workers who are self-employed. In other words, men are more likely to be self-employed than women. Yet, how do these rates differ by age among older working Americans by gender? While the rates of self-employment increase with age among both men and women in the labor force, the rates increase the most dramatically for men. So among workers in their early 50s, the share of men who are self-employed is not actually that much different than that for women. Yet among workers over the age of 80, the share of men who work for themselves is nearly 20% higher than that of women. So that's a pretty big difference. And lastly, what about if we consider race? So in this instance, I'll only consider individuals who identify as either white or Black due to data limitations from the data set I'm analyzing. So in the past dozen years or so, and again, looking at all people over the age of 50 and all people who are working, the share of the older white population that reports being self-employed has also consistently been about 10% higher than the older Black population who is self-employed. But again, how does this differ by age groups among older workers? Well, I found that among those who are in their early 50s, the share of the older white respondents who are self-employed was just slightly higher than that of older Black respondents. Yet this difference increased dramatically with age. And by the time you looked at people in their late 70s, the share of white respondents who were self-employed was about 17% higher than older Black respondents. And this increased even more among those older than 80. So to be clear, all of the statistics I just listed were what we often call descriptive statistics. They are easy to understand and they do a relatively good job of providing an overview of the self-employment picture among older Americans. Yet it can sometimes help to control for other potential confounding factors that might cloud the results, perhaps affecting them and their implications. So in a separate study that's now in press in the journal, The Gerontologist, I looked at the predictors of self-employment among older people while controlling for a variety of factors. And for this study, and using an intersectionality framework, what I did was break the analysis down into two parts: workers ages 50 to 61 and workers ages 62 and older. So why did I do it this way? Well, 62 is the age in which people can file for early Social Security retirement benefits. And I was curious how having access to this important part of one's financial safety net and being close to Medicare eligible age of 65 might relate to the key factors that are related to self-employment. And here's what I found. Among older self-employed people ages 50 to 61, and while controlling for a variety of sociodemographic factors, the odds of being self-employed among older Black Americans was about 60% lower than the odds of being self-employed among older white Americans. Yet when looking at the group age 62 and older, this discrepancy was dramatically reduced. In fact, there was no statistically significant relationship between race and self-employment in this oldest group. And this difference between the two age groups was significantly different, which means that the odds of being self-employed for Black Americans in the older group was higher than their younger counterparts. So everything I've talked about so far relates to rates of self-employment. Yet what about interest? This is where I really started to think about the ways we could increase the diversity of older self-employed people. In a separate study using another nationally representative data set of people aged 50 to 70 residing in the US, I found that older Black Americans were more than twice as likely to report a high level of interest in starting a new organization in the next 5 to 10 years. More so, education, health, marital status, income, and wealth, all things that are related to self-employment in later life that I didn't have time to discuss today, were not related to interest. In other words, interest in entrepreneurship in later life is more egalitarian, yet actual entrepreneurship is not. So what does this all mean? Well, first and foremost, there's a lot of interest in self-employment, running your own business, being your own boss, being in charge of your schedule and working on things that you want to work on. These are all reasons why people are interested in this. Yet among older adults, a range of sociodemographic factors may relate to accessing opportunities, and race and systemic racism are a part of this reason. White Americans in general have access to more affordable banks and lending institutions than people of color, giving them more access to small business financing. They also tend to have larger social or professional networks that have access to key contacts who can help them start their new businesses. And white Americans in general have more wealth than Black Americans, and we know that higher levels of wealth can help someone weather the storm if their organization or their venture flops. So how might we go about fixing this? Well, reshaping our institutions so people, regardless of race or socioeconomic background, receive similar economic opportunities would help dramatically. In fact, I would argue that a key way to increase the diversity of who is able to become self-employed would be to strengthen our social safety net. It is telling that when people become 62 and gain access to Social Security retirement benefits, that the diversity of who is self-employed also increases. Other researchers have shown that self-employment rates actually increase once people qualify for Medicare at 65. These are not small programs serving small needs. Social Security provides foundational financial security, and Medicare provides both financial and health security. In the US, one's place of work is the primary place where people receive healthcare and save for retirement. And we know that self-employed people are far less likely to have health insurance or to be saving for retirement than people working in more traditional wage and salary jobs. In fact, we know that many people who decide not to become self-employed do so because they're afraid they're going to lose access to their workplace healthcare and retirement benefits. This has often been called entrepreneurship lock. Separately, in looking at other age groups, we know that receiving SNAP benefits, otherwise known as food stamps, increases rates of entrepreneurship. And so does allowing people who are taking unemployment insurance to begin new businesses. As a case in point, even though we tend to think of the US as one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world, we actually have the lowest self-employment rate of all countries tracked by the OECD at about 6%. Meanwhile, countries where more people have access to the social safety net, regardless of where they work, have higher rates of self-employment, such as at 10% in Germany and 15% in the UK. So self-employment, while a fantastic form of work on many levels that can help people to pursue work with meaning and a sense of purpose, is also a pretty precarious form of work, and ways we can buffer the negative effects of this work would very likely increase the diversity of who can join in. Thank you.